Hey y'all, I'm Lisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, and if you saw a recent video, you know that I made a big mistake. I thought this was a classic sized happy planner cover. It is a big size, and I'm going to change that today. So if you want to see how I transform this cover, stay tuned. All right, so here's the plan. It's to take this cover, both front and back, use a classic sized cover as a template, and kind of see what I can come up with, what I can create. I have some bookbinding materials that I think are going to come in really handy. So that's the plan. I'm going to bring you guys along. I will link everything that I end up using down below so that you can see how I do it. And maybe this will inspire you to change up some of your covers as well. All right, I'll put you guys on fast forward. Let's go. All right, so the first thing that I need to do is to measure out where I want my cover to be. So I'm actually using a dry erase marker here so I can trace around the size of what a normal Happy Planner cover is. You don't want to go by just the 7 by 9.25, which is the size of Happy Planner pages, because the covers are slightly bigger. So I've traced it out. I used a dry erase marker so it can be easily wiped off, and then I'm just going to trim off right to the inside edge of there. I'm checking to see if it's coming apart. Here's the deal. It did not come apart right away. So that was a plus for me. I was afraid that it would just completely come apart. It's like when you've laminated something. I remember this from when I was teaching, and you cut too close to the edge of the lamination, then it's not sealed anymore. So this one didn't come completely apart. So that was a plus. So I cut along the lines, then I'm just going to take my scissors and hand cut little curves here because we don't want super sharp, pokey corners. So we'll cut out the curves. I'm just trying to see if it's going to come apart. You can see I'm kind of testing it. And once that's done, I will take a cloth and wipe off any of the excess wet erase marker or dry erase marker that is on there. Now, so many of you told me, don't do this, don't try it. I figured I would give it a try. The whole point is that I can share with you what I learned. It's still not coming apart, you guys. I wanted to be able to share with you what I learned. Would I change some things in how I do this? Probably next time, and you'll see where my biggest mistake comes in just a moment. So before I start working on the edging, what I'm going to do next is pull out my We Are Memory Keepers tool, my disc punch tool, which is kind of vital if you're going to work on creating your own covers. And so I'm using binder clips to put the new cover and the old cover together so I can see where the holes should be. And then this tool punches straight through that thick plastic. It's like not a big deal at all. I didn't correctly line up the holes though. That was my bad. And then I kind of fudged where the holes would go. I don't know what, I was fudging this a little bit. So I should have just gone with it where it was lined up, but the first two holes are slightly off. That is not a big deal on a piece of paper. On a cover is something different because it does have some issues sliding on the discs. So I'll throw that out there. I should have just been really consistent where all the hole punching was. That's okay though. We're going to keep going. Now this is another We Are Memory Keepers tool. This is the book binding tool. This is actually the Paige Evans edition. I think they have some different editions now. This is a great tool for a lot of different things. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually figuring out how I'm going to line this up. This is me not remembering how I used my tool in the past. You need that green cover on the top. What is going to happen is I'm going to be able to use this to line up the edge. Now the long edge doesn't fit in the binding tool, so I'm having to kind of do some funky stuff, but I'm using this tool that's poking a bunch of holes all along the edge of this planner cover. And what I'm going to do is kind of like a whip stitch all the way around the edge with some binding string, some book binding string, which is like a waxy covered string. And that is going to add a super cool texture along the edge, which I was all about. And then it's also going to make sure that it doesn't come apart over time. So here I go. I'm punching holes all along the long edge. The short edges do fit in the bookbinding piece, so I'll be able to show you how it works a little bit more easily. Basically, it's this board that has all of these holes, and you can punch holes in all kinds of things that you are wanting to bind together. See, I line it up exactly where I want it, and then I use these little screws. That green piece actually holds it in place, and then it's much easier to do it once you have the screws in place. But like I said, it didn't really work for the longer side, so I had to kind of do a jerry-rigged system to make that work. Sorry for my head getting in the way. I just wanted to make sure everything was lined up how I wanted. Now I have holes all around the edge of this cover, and I'm going to do the same thing on the back cover. Now, here is my second big mistake. Okay, I trace this cover just like I did the first one. Like, let's trace it. That works. That's going to work and be fine. I trim it out. All of that is fine. It's the right size. This again is the back cover. So I'm going to pull out my paper trimmer, get it all trimmed out. Same thing as I did before. I'm just cutting off the clear part right at the end. Everything is sized correctly. And then I go to punch the holes. And so really, it turns out that my big mistakes on this project all involved the punching of the holes, because what happens is I don't punch the holes in the right side or on the right side. You can see trimming out those corners just so they're not so pokey, like what happens with when you use that laminated sheet. I don't cut it on the right side, you guys. I line it up incorrectly. I punch all these holes. I do a much better job punching evenly this time, but it turns out to be on the wrong side, and I don't realize it until much later, and I end up being really frustrated. So that happened. I needed to line it up and make sure how I punched it is so that the animals are on the backside, and I wanted the red to be on the backside, and it didn't turn out like I meant it to. Now, it's still, I keep going, and I just always want to keep it real. I don't want to pretend like this is how I meant for it to happen. No, that's not how I meant for it to happen, and I want you guys to learn from my mistakes. Before you add in the holes for your discs, you want to check and double check that it is oriented the correct way. Just check, double check 14 times and make sure you're punching in the correct side where you mean to punch. Now, even though I made mistakes on this particular cover project, it gave me hope, you guys, that this is something that I could do in the future again, and even make it even just a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more refined, you might say. All right, now that both planner covers are cut down, holes punched, they're ready to go, I'm using this binding thread. Now, this is like a thicker thread, and like I said, it has a waxy feel to it. It's very durable, which is why I chose to use this as opposed to like embroidery floss or something like that. You want to cut a ton, probably at least 2 lengths of like around the whole cover, around the edges of the cover, just to make sure you have plenty. I'm using one of the needles that comes as part of this bookbinding kit. And then what I'm going to do is kind of form like a whip stitch pattern. So I come in from the back, and then what I'm going to end up doing, tying a knot to get it started at the beginning, and then I'm going to go every other hole. So I come up from the back, skip a hole, again come up from the back, and then move back a hole. So it's like forwards 2, back 1, forwards 2, back 1. And that gives me just a little bit of extra, I don't know, a little bit of extra string around the edge. I like the kind of X pattern that it ends up making as I keep going. This took quite a long time. You're going to see me going into like super speed in just a moment working through this. This took quite a long time. It was a little bit difficult on my fingers, just pushing the needle through, even though I'd used the awl to pre-poke those holes. It was still not the easiest thing to do. So it's definitely something to have patience with as you're working through. I'm trying to show you. See, I skip one hole, and then I come backwards and go back a hole, and I'm always coming from the back. So I went backwards. Now I'm going to go forwards, skipping a hole. See how it's making that X? I think that that's kind of a cool little detail. So skipping a hole, going forwards, and then I go backwards to the hole I skipped. and I totally dig how it ends up looking. So it's a fun way. There's lots of different ways you could do the stitching around. There's no rule for sure that says you need to do that specifically. I also had several of you write in that said you have done something similar, cutting down a big size planner cover and you use tape around the edges. I think that's another great idea. There's a few things you could put, just a little bit of glue maybe just to make sure it doesn't come apart. The whole idea of the threading all the way around was to make sure that as this went into my planner and had some wear and tear on it, that it wouldn't come apart. Because, you know, our planners, if we're using them the right way, they travel with us. They go through a lot during a month. I change out my planner cover every single month, but they'll go through a lot. So I wanted to make sure that this one was going to be strong and resilient as it went through. So I'm going to just do my best to go all the way around this cover. I also thought using the contrasting color with the yellow was a lot of fun. And like I said, I totally dug the texture. I like how this project ended up. I'm actually pretty pleased and encouraged because I feel like now I want to try it again on something different. I can definitely use this cover on my planner. It doesn't turn on the discs perfectly because of how I punched the holes. That's on me. If I had been a little bit more patient and a little bit slower in my crafting, then I probably would not have made the mistakes that I did. Sometimes I get a little excited about a project and I push through super fast, and you know, mistakes happen. It happens to all of us, even when we do it on YouTube, but I always try to keep my mistakes in there just so you guys know that it really does happen to all of us, and that a lot of times you can just keep going and still make something work in the end. So you can see I didn't have enough string to start with, and so I had to end up tying on some more string. So really check and double check that you are using as much, like you are giving yourself as much string as possible so that you can make it all the way around the planner cover, because I think that's better than having to re-tie the string in the middle. But it's super cute. I'm not going to do the back on camera, but I will show you the final finished product once it's all done. Yeah, I hope you guys end up really liking it. All right, here's the finished product. A couple of things. First, did I punch the back incorrectly? Why, yes. Yes, I did. I punched it on the wrong side. I was getting distracted from text messages, but that's okay because I'm just going to flip it like that. Like, it's fine. It's still going to work. I kind of am really digging the texture along the edges. I think using bookbinding thread instead of like embroidery floss is going to make it stronger and hold up a little bit more. So I totally think this is something you can do to covers if they are not what you wanted them to be, they're not the right size, and maybe you pick up the cover on clearance as part of a planner and you know you're only paying a few dollars. Well, let's change it out and make it the cover you want. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. Let me know, would you ever do this to one of your planner covers? Let me know in the comments below. Like I said before, I will link all of the supplies in the description box so you can check them out if you are interested. I want to give a huge shout out to all of my Patreon members. Thank you all so much for all of your support. We're having a fabulous time over on Patreon. If you want to join us, there is a link to my Patreon account in the description box below as well. All right, I hope that you have a fabulous day. And as always, keep it creative.